to press record. So welcome to this Northern Real Farming Conference session. We're here to watch a world premiere, which is a bit exciting, of the short documentary It's Always Been. And the stars of this documentary are here tonight. So we've got Kirsty and Kevin Duncan here. And the film explores who has access to land. And we'll have lots of space for questions about what comes up in the film. So Kirsty and Kevin Duncan are a husband and wife team, and they're both farmers who work and live in the Scottish borders. It's Always Been, as a film, looks at the journey they've gone on. So we'll be hearing about that from them and in the film tonight. And the film was made as part of a new Creative North, which is a scheme that helps those with low income backgrounds make their first film. And it will be shown on the BBC in 2022, which is why it's a preview screening tonight, and it's why we can't film it as well. So you're all very special and lucky, I guess, and privileged to be here tonight. And we're also joined here by one of the team who helped to create it, so Joanne Coates. And Joanne is based in the north of England and is interested in rurality, working life, and class inequality. So in 2020, Joanne was commissioned as artist in residence at Berwick Visual Arts Centre for Rural Economy and Berwick Visual Arts. And in 2021, she was commissioned as an artist working on the Teeswell project, looking at social justice and the rural. So Joanne's worked on various arts organisations to look at the themes of class, inequalities and social justice, rurality and community cohesion. And this can be seen in the commissions that she's worked on, for example, with Middlesbrough, Miller and the Hull City of Culture. And she was recently awarded the Jarwood Photo Works Award. So I'm excited to learn more about your work, Joanne, as well. So I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to hand over to you guys to show the film and say a bit more.
So I just wanted to say a quick thank you to everyone for joining us, and obviously a really big thank you to Kirsty and Kevin for putting their kind of like trust in me when I kind of came with them to them with this idea and like making a film and being really open. So what I'll do is I'll just start sharing my screen. If there are any problems, just kind of type in the chat box, but hopefully it'll all go smoothly. And yeah, so I'll start the film. And I will hand over to Anna for some questions as well, and Kirsty and Kevin also will be speaking as well.
Yeah, so I guess so that was a really like a short but there's a lot in that documentary. So before I ask some questions that I've noted down, I just wondered, are there any questions that anyone else here has to ask? So if you have them and you want to put them in the chat, please feel free to, or if you want to unmute and ask a question out loud, please also feel free to. But to get us going, I guess a question I have is, so I'm based in Lancaster, and here we're starting a farm start scheme. So we're trying to support new entrants into farming. And like hearing stories like this about how hard it is, I guess if you could, if you reflect back on the challenges you faced, are there any ways that others could have supported in making your journey easier? Are there ways that we can make the journey easier for new people wanting to enter into farming?
It's a difficult one to answer that, I think, because there's two major problems, and finance is an obvious one for most of us, but just the availability of land, and maybe that slightly older generation hanging on a little bit longer than some of them should. I know that sounds harsh, and a lot of them are fit and willing and able to do so, but certainly I know a few farmers round about here that are well past their sell-by dates. Maybe could move on and let some of the younger people have a go, not necessarily ourselves, but anybody that's capable and able to do so. How we persuade them to do that, it's not an easy one to to answer, I don't think.
Saw a question, but it's disappeared again.
I think it's there. Do you want me to read it out? It's, have you found that land in the borders has been taken out of farming and put into forestry?
Yeah, there is a lot of farms round about getting planted for forestry. We actually look after a farm up Petrick. There's someone down south owns it. We buy in new lambs and then sell them on as gimmers. It's actually earmarked to be planted at some point, and we're just basically looking after it until the time comes it's to be planted, and that'll be over 1,000 acres lost to trees.
Great, thank you for that. And welcome to those who have just joined us. So we've seen the short documentary and we're now just having open questions. So if you have any, please feel free to ask. So I guess another question I have is, what are your hopes for the future? Like, you talked in the film that you feel like you're stuck in a rut. Can you find a way out, or have you settled with what you have to work with and you're finding ways to evolve that?
Yeah, to be honest, no, we still are looking, well, trying anyway, to find that little bit extra ground, that bigger farm, try and fulfill our dreams to actually have our own place at some point. Whether we ever do or not, we'll find out in the future, I suppose. But we'll keep trying. We'll keep plugging on. We'll never give up. We'll try not to give up, anyways.
Well,
yes.
Initially, we rented 30 acres. It was a starter block from the Forestry Commission, and the ground next door to us was let out in seasonal rents, but someone else had that. But that farmer actually retired. So now we were available, and we've got an extra 60 acres just next door to where we are. But it's only from like the beginning of April to the end of December. So we're only stuck in this 30 acres for 3 months of the year, which limits us to the sheep numbers we have to feed during the winter. I mean, yes, we can, come spring, we can go to the mart and buy sheep with lambs at foot to boost their numbers, but then we just have to sell them again come December because we just haven't got the ground to keep them on, which is kind of defeating the purpose. I mean, we want to progress, we want to buy new, better stock, but when you're stuck with 30 acres plus, it's coming up for renewal May next year, and we got in a 5-year rent with a possible to extend to 10 years. So we're in negotiations at the minute to see if we can extend another 5 years. If we can't, we've got this other bit of ground until December next year, and then after that, if we can't find anyone else, we're snookered.
And I was just going to ask you as well, so I'm guessing everyone here will kind of maybe understand about the difference between like renting land and owning land and renewing, but just in case that they don't, would you be able to kind of just explain it in like layman's terms?
Well, owning is obviously just owning. It's your land. You just pay a little bit of tax, a fair bit of tax now and again, but apart from that, it's your land to do with within reason as you see fit. Whereas letting or renting a land, you're in agreement with the person that actually owns it, so you're kind of tied in with the amount of time you've got, whether it's a limited term agreement like ourselves, which is between 5 and 10 years, or a mid-term agreement, which is sort of 15 years roughly, up to a large agreement, 25 plus years, which is what everybody aims to have. But not many people get nowadays, as you start to get into the right to buy schemes and such like, and which kind of worries the landowners themselves on that side of it. So I hope that kind of explains the letting and owning side of it.
And obviously, so when we were making the film, it was always going to be a short film. So the new creative scheme is for you to make your first film. So they said, oh, you have 4 minutes to make a film. And obviously we managed to make it a bit longer, but there's lots of like audio and time that I kind of spent talking to Kirsty and Kev that is all around this and them getting that chance to maybe like have that farm and the emotions that kind of went on. But I wanted to ask, like, how was it for you guys, the experience of like making it? And maybe if you could kind of talk us through the process that was going on when the film's being made and if anything's changed to where you're at now.
Well, nothing's really changed since when we made the film. We're still on the same bit of land in the same area. Let's see.
Well, the actual process of doing the film, the documentary that we done with you, kind of, I suppose both of us kind of sat back and take stock and look at what we're doing ourselves as well, and whether it's the right thing to do or not. You kind of, I suppose, speak out loud about what you're doing. I suppose it makes you think what the whole story is, and I suppose it made us, well, it certainly made me more determined to go down that road anyway. So.
Yeah, I think the difference between, I mean, we're both self-employed and work on different farms, just because the sheep side of the thing, they just wipe their face. We're not making any money on it. It's what money you are making, you're putting back into putting your stock, buying better stock. So we have to be self-employed and work on other farms to actually live and eat, to provide for ourselves. So you kind of wonder sometimes, has it been worth it? I mean, the sheep that where they're a 40-minute drive from where we live. So we're spending half our time driving back and forward all the time. And you think to yourself sometimes, is this really worth it? Can I stand, if we do sign another lease, are we going to stand another 5 years? I mean, the first winter we had the Beast for the East hat, and we couldn't even get outside the front door, let alone get to the sheep. You know, why are we doing this? Sometimes you get asked.
And would you say, like, sometimes I guess like there's those questions of why are you doing it, but would you say like it's something that you also like couldn't not do? Like I always say when people say like, why do you do like photography, then I'm saying, well, I couldn't not do it. And I think that a lot of farmers are the same, like they couldn't work in an office because it just wouldn't like be their way of life and like the way that they are.
I think you've hit the nail right in the head there. It's in DNA, in their blood, whatever you like to say. I couldn't imagine myself doing anything else. I shudder to think about an office. I don't think the office could stand me being in there either, to be honest with you. It's just what I'm bred and brought up to do, and one way or another I'll be in farming somehow.
I know, I say we'd be bored if we didn't have them. I mean, it's totally, I mean, when we work on other farms, and I mean, we've got the same farms that we go to all the time. Some of them are actually old family friends that actually work with my dad and things like that. And you get the old stories, but when you go and you're looking at their sheep, the farmer's sheep, and he says, is that a good tip and all that? And you think, yeah. But when it's your own, and you think, oh yeah, that's a good tip, it feels better because it's your own.
And I've asked these guys these questions a million times, like I've asked them loads of questions, but I know that you who are listening haven't heard the questions. So I guess like, what would you say to like a young person, maybe they're like still in school and like all they care about is farming, but they might not have land, so they might do like shepherding, or they might like be obsessed with kind of like helping wherever they can, getting that experience. Like, what would you say to them first, I guess, if they came to you and said, can we like come and help you lambing time? And then maybe if they said like, what would you do like if I was going to go into a similar situation that you're in?
For a youngster to come in, yes, I'd certainly be glad of the help and any advice we can give them, we would give them. As far as advising a young person like that, keep doing what you're doing, keep going around as many farms as you can, helping out. picking up hints and tips, not just on the practical side of it. And there's a lot of administration, a lot of paperwork, as Kirsty knows, that goes along with the farming side of it. Any hints and tips that folk can help them youngsters with on that side of it as well. It's something that farmers don't really talk to each other much about. Yes, they'll tell you feed them this or move them there or do that, but when it comes to paperwork, not many farmers will share that side of the job with you. Sticking at school as well, and you do need that education to help you through this job. It's not just a dirty hands job, as I say. And just keep plugging away, basically.
And I think build up some capital. I mean, when we went for that starter farm in 2011 and didn't get it, I mean, we had no equipment, no nothing, it was just us and the dogs, and that was it. So we went back and decided it was time to build a bit of capital up so that we had money to spend. So during them years, we purchased a quad bike, we got stock trailers and stuff like that. So if we did come get a chance somewhere, we had something that we could use. It wasn't going to start from scratch. And when we got this starter block, I think it was 2017, we thought, well, this is the first step. We can build up some stock numbers so that if we do get the bigger place, we're not, again, starting from absolutely zero. We have some stock to take with us. We've got the quad bike, we've got the stock trailers, ring feeders now. We're starting to build up equipment so that it's not such a shock if you move on to somewhere bigger.
And I just wondered, could you talk a little bit about like that process of applying for that startup farm? Like what, like practically, like what did you have to do?
Well, it was all up to me really, because Kevin doesn't do paperwork or anything like that. That's my job. I mean, you had to put a business plan in, which is rather difficult because you don't know prices, what's going to happen. You had to do a cash flow projection for the first 3 years, which didn't make pretty reading, to be honest, for the first 3 years. I think it was about just the third year you were going to, if you were completely honest, you were going to make a profit, and it was only about £100 or something. So some of these short tenancies aren't the best because you're only getting into it when you should be making money, and then you have to leave. Yeah. What else do we have? Oh, well, business plan. If you got through, you would have an interview and all that. We didn't get as far as that, but no, mostly it was business plan and cash flow projections. It doesn't sound that much, but by the time you've done it, you're scratching your head and you try to get the numbers to work, and you've got to start finding prices of feed for the cash flow projection. But it's never the same because feed prices this year have gone through the roof. You can't, for 3 years in advance, you can't project how much cash you're going to make, how much you're going to lose, because the prices vary so often.
And I'll just read you a question from Rachel. So she said, thank you for sharing your experience and thoughts. She just said, sorry, she has got a camera off. I was wondering what your thoughts were on whether having a larger farm or your own land would help you improve in the economic viability of your sheep, or do you think it would still be a challenge, and what are the reasons for this?
I think it would certainly make life a lot easier if we owned or had our own larger farm to work on. At least then we can kind of cover a few more bases. We're kind of limited, obviously, to a small number, basically 100 sheep. So you've got your return and your retaining stock that's to take off of those numbers, which is 20 or 30 sheep you can't sell for the following year. So income's shortened through that side of it as well. Whereas a larger farm, you can kind of space things out a bit, and you can sell a lot more sort of fat lambs or store lambs, whichever way you want to go down. Also, you've got some more kind of greening schemes that you can get yourself into, which helps subsidy side of it. Kind of dirty word, I suppose. But it's always money that's got to be coming in as well. Whereas the 30 acre that we've got, there's little or no subsidy basically on what we're getting off it.
I was gonna ask you about that as well. So like in the Dales, there's like a protecting the landscape scheme where people can have funding that way. But say if you are renting the land, how does that work on a scheme like that? Do you have to, say if you had an idea to do something, do you have to like ask the landowner, or like how, you know, can you not enter into it because you're not the owner of the land?
You can go through a process of speaking to the landowner. It's basically down on greening schemes anyway. Most of it's basically down to them on a short-term tenancy, whether they allow us to go down the greening side of things, whether it's going to be viable for future tenants as well, or whether it's got to take away from any future tenants what anyone was planning to do. Also, it's quite greening schemes are kind of a long-term sort of thing, whereas short-term tenancy, obviously you've got that only sort of 5-10 years you're there and then you're away again, so it kind of deducts from the whole thing as well.
And kind of, and then thinking about like, I guess the Scottish borders specifically, it might be quite different to other areas, and I guess the Scottish borders are quite maybe unique, or even like Northumberland, because you have like hill farms, but you also have like big amounts of like really rich fertile land as well. And I wondered if you could kind of talk about the specifics of the land in the borders and kind of what that's like and what that means for people who are farming there.
Obviously in this area, as you say, it's very hilly, hard ground. There's not it's either tree, sheep or cows. That's about all that grows around these parts here, but it only takes sort of 20 minutes, and like you say, you're in very rich fertile ground with potato production, wheat, oats, all the rest of it is happening just that, like I say, 20 minutes down the road from us. There's between here and there, there's quite a lot of farms that are managing to mix the both up and keeping themselves quite diverse as well. So I presume it's very similar in the Northumberland area. Once you get down that kind of east side of it, yeah, the diversity is certainly all there. So.
And what for you two was like, I guess, one of the main, I think like over the last year, obviously, like I first met Kirsty and Kev when I was doing a project that was looking at female farmers. So I met Kirsty, and then obviously met Kev as well, because they work together quite a lot, and kind of spoke to them about that, and then approached them with the film. But what made you keep going when you had the knockback about the farm? Because it is, I guess it's quite, and maybe this is something that farmers are good at, like handling, like keeping going through like a maybe tough situation. Like, do you think that's something farmers kind of have to have a skill for, and especially maybe people looking into farming, do they have to be able to kind of like maybe take those knockbacks as well?
Yeah, I think you do. I mean, 2011, in hindsight, yes, we were financially stretched, and it probably was. I mean, it was 2011, so it was only a 10-year tenancy. So technically, by now, we would have came to the end of the tenancy if we got it. And the idea is for you to move on to a bigger farm, but how do you do that when there's no bigger farms? The person that did get the starter farm is out and gone from farming now. He's that 10 years and gone. So it's, yeah, you take your knockbacks, but I mean, we lost some ground. Was it this year? We had a field where we kept our taps over the winter, which was close to home, easier for feeding, and we've actually lost that. But we've actually managed to get a field on one of the local farms that the farmer's coming out of for winter grazing, just to keep the ewe hogs out the way. So that's a bonus, but we can't live thinking, what's going to happen next if we lose this bit of ground? So yeah, you take knockbacks, but I think you try and carry on if it's something that you love doing.
And like, so the kind of images where the car was kind of going through the woodland, that's the only way to get to Kirsty and Kev's house. You can try and get other ways, but you won't get that way, as I have realized many times. But it's quite, how would you kind of like describe that journey? Like, so from yours to the fields where you farm?
Well, it's 15 minutes from the house to the main road, the A7.
It's only 3 miles.
Which is only 3 miles because it's that twisty and windy. You can't go fast. So then you get to the A7 and you're all right for a while. Then you get onto another twisty and windy road, which is all single, most of it's all single track. So if you meet anybody, you're reversing backwards, and it just takes a lot of your time up. 40 minutes there. By the time you go around your sheep, and then 40 minutes back, and then you've still got to work on other farms, so you're trying to cram everything in a day. In the winters, it's dark by 5 o'clock, so you're pushed for time, and you just feel that you're wasting time sat in the car driving when you could be doing something more productive. But I suppose we wanted to start, and we decided that we were going to travel that, and we've done it for the last 4.5 years. The fuel station loves us.
And I guess one of the questions, or I guess one of the things I wanted maybe you guys to share was, so like where you go to farm, there's like all the sheep pens and things, but maybe if you're renting land, and this might be for anyone thinking about it as well, I guess it's harder to put money, or that you might not even be allowed to build structures on that land that would help you to farm and help your stock. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and like the difficulties of that, or not having those kind of structures in place, or not being able to have them.
Well, the first 30 acres that we got had no sheep pens. So basically it was make do. So we bought a load of wood. Kevin sat together making loads of gates, bought some stabs, posts, and we made our own sheep pens. We did buy a sheep race from a farm sale, so that we could shed sheep and all that, but most of it is all homemade. And that the sheep pens you see in the film is actually the extra 60 acres that we rent now, so we get to use them as well. But because it's across a river and all that, we still have to use our homemade ones because we keep the pure Cheviots separate during the summer with the Cheviots that we cross with the Texel. So we do need both sets of pens. And then there is another field that we rent where there is no pens at all, but we're lucky enough that we beg, steal and borrow, and we can borrow a set of mobile pens now and again if we're really desperate. But yeah, it was Kevin and his handiwork made our pens. So if we do move, they can all come with us.
And if we were financially able to, we'd love to get a set of proper mobile pens, but you're looking at £12,000 plus for a set of pens you've got to use once a month or twice a month or something like that. So for us to send, you can pay a couple £100 for paling rails and stabs. It was a no-brainer for us, really, just to get going anyway.
I think that's one of the things maybe about farming that I find like a way that maybe like the rest of society could think, is that like mending things and like reusing things, and it's like you always see that.
Yeah, it's one thing I found out. You got to be prepared to mend a fence or put up a dry stone wall, a dike, or even have a go at an engine or two, even though I've no idea what I'm doing. You've got to try your best to keep the costs down wherever you can. So.
Yeah, we had trouble with moles, so I've actually enrolled in a mole course for next month so that I can save money and hiring a mole man in. Hopefully I can catch them.
And I guess like that's, you both have quite a lot of other skills that you kind of bring, and like I just got to know this from meeting people, and like it's something that I've noticed about like all farmers that I meet, and is that like kind of out of essentialness for the job. Like say if someone was starting a farm, like would you say to them like get as many skills as possible, like do, you know, like if you can get on a free course, do that course, or if it's like a grant?
Without a doubt, it's something you need to be prepared to do is throw yourself at any job, regardless whether you like it or not, whether it's mending or mole catching or whatever it is. The more you can do for yourself, the better it is. Yes, there's skilled workers, there's skilled mechanics, there's skilled fencers, there's so on and so forth, and they do a damn good job. And they ask money for it too, money that we don't always, or we never can afford, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Well, there's certain jobs you just have to bend with it and pay a professional come in and do. But as much as you can save money sorting out and fixing it yourself, yeah. So, like you say, take the courses when they come along. Learn as many skills as you can, even if you don't think it'll apply for farming, it will somewhere along the line.
Yeah, my diking skills is throw it in the wall and run away. I get him to do the diking.
And I guess something people might not think about, so when they talk about land access or having even like a small holding, a smaller farm, is then like the mart and how that works and how that comes into play. And so I went to the mart Lockerbie with you guys, and we were there for a big sale. And I wondered if you could talk a bit like that, and how maybe if you don't have a name, then it can be quite hard to access farming that way and to sell at a mart if you're like brand new to it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got, it's not so bad in some of the breeds. I mean, some of the names, bigger farms, they're getting better prices for their taps and all that. I mean, you can have the same tap with exactly the same breed, and it makes half the price. We did not too bad this year, and we took 5 this year, and I mean, sometimes maybe 5's too many for a small outfit like us, but what we're trying to do is sell these taps to raise enough money to buy something better. I mean, the first year we bought a tap for £400. The next year, well, it wasn't the next year, but the next time it was £700. This time we stretched our budget to try and get us something that's hopefully going to improve our stock, and then hopefully break into it and get a better name for ourselves is the idea. But I mean, when you're up against people that can pay £29,000 for a tap, we've not got a chance. It's kind of hard.
And how long would you, again, like if someone was thinking about like getting into this, how long would you say to them, just as a guide, like would take them to get to a place where that they could not even like comfortably, but just kind of like manage and be all right getting by, like how many years? And like, you know, like that process of going to the mart and kind of leveling up slowly. And like, do you think it's like a turtles game? Like how long would that take for just someone new kind of into it to get used to everything and get kind of like their name up there and slowly get started?
Say you'd be looking at sort of 5-6 years just to be noticed. I wouldn't say you would get a big name. You might never get a big name, if I'm honest with you. Now, you've got to remember, some of these big names have been doing this for generations, literally generations. Others, they've come into a lot of money, they've bought in that stock and basically started from someone with a name, they've just moved it on to their own name. So it's a kind of difficult question to truly answer, but on the main, yes, you'll get noticed after that 5-6 years, and then you just got to keep plugging away and telling everybody how great you are and all the rest of it, and just blag your way through it. You might 10 or 12 years, you might start getting up the tree a bit, but then again, you might not.
Yeah, I mean, we're nearly into our 5th year, and I would say we're starting to improve our stock now, and the stock's of a good standard now. But it's took us 5 years. I mean, yeah, we bought some decent stock in to begin with, but we've had to spend money on the taps and all that. And yes, last year's hogs, which are now gimmers, which are at the tap just now, I think they're the best we've ever had. And the hogs that are coming on now are just of a similar, they're off the same breed and just a similar standard. nice ewe hogs, but it's took us to now to get to that where we want to be. But obviously you're going to try and make yourself be better as well.
That must be a really nice feeling though, to know that the kind of like the work that you've put in, the effort that you've put in to looking after your stock has had that like payoff.
It's nice to see, you know, when you go into and see them and they're just all like, for what we'd say, nice white in the face, just really nice ewe hogs. I should say we keep South Country Cheviets so that people know what we're on about.
And like how you were talking about that 5-year process, I wonder if you could kind of talk us a bit through that. Again, maybe people have land, or maybe they've worked in farming but they don't have land, or they haven't had a chance to access land. How does that like 5-year process work, and like what did you have to do on each year to kind of make the most out of what you have as a farm, and I guess in a business sense, to make it work?
Right, well, obviously the first year you're just going in with whatever sheep or whatever stock you could get hold of or could afford at the time. And it's big, small, not always the best that you can get hold of, but it's something you could afford at the time. Then the following year you've still got them, but their daughters are starting to come into the mix. And then once you get past that, under that third year, you're getting into your own genetics, your own breeding, which starts putting everything, just starts knitting everything in together. Obviously, by the time you get to that 5th year, that's pretty much most of your genetics. It's getting bred off the daughters again, so that's you into the niche market you want to be in. Basically, that's you set off on your path down the road. Basically,
yeah, we bought in South Country Cheviets with mule lambs at foot to start off with. I think it was about 30-35 to start, and then we sold the mule ewe lambs at Longtown, and then sold the wethers either fat or store. The following year we bought some draft Cheviets in just to boost the numbers up. Then don't make the mistake of keeping your sheep too long, because we were like, oh well, we'll keep that one a bit longer, she's done all right, but you get nothing but problems in lambing times, no milk, bad bags. We learned that lesson once. We thought, well, she'll do another year, but we started to buy it, breeding our own, because if you keep buying in old sheep, you're forever buying them in, because they'll do a year, maybe 2 if you're lucky, and then you're in a whole host of problems. But now we're lucky now. I mean, was it last year we had the choice of 40 ewe lambs to keep. We sold some pure Cheviets, and we ran about 20 hogs, and then this year we're running 28 hogs. So these are all coming in, and it's all our breeding now. So maybe in a couple of years, the last of the drafts that we've bought in will be gone, and it will be all our breeding, hopefully, fingers crossed.
And what does that feel like when you get to that kind of point? Like, is there like a moment when, like, is it planned so that you kind of know it's going to happen, or do you kind of like almost forget that you've got to that point and then feel really proud and like kind of, or are you still planning for what's going to happen in the next few years, so you kind of can't really enjoy that moment?
I think you really stop planning. You're always looking to the future to see, are we going down the right road, or are we doing the right thing? But at the same time, you stop, and it's a nice day, and you stop and you actually look at what you're doing. Yeah, we've done this. We've sorted these sheep out. We've made them to what they are, and it is a proud moment.
I mean, we do buy in maybe a handful of gimmers or something just to vary the bloodstock now and again. We didn't buy in anything this year, but we had plenty coming in ourselves. But it's nice to buy off of somebody else just to vary the blood and just see what lambs you get out of them. But we try to keep it mostly our own.
And I guess like maybe on a more like positive thing, people are starting to look at farming in a different way, and I think they're starting to see the value in smaller farms. So maybe like, well, I'm hoping that that leads to maybe more schemes where there is people who can get access to smaller amounts of land rather than maybe like 2,000 acres. And what would it mean to you guys? So I don't know about in the borders, but like in the Dales, they used to have these schemes of the council where they would, like people again could apply, but there were more of them, and there would be land, and that land was like put aside for young people or for people who had never had the access to get into farming. And so then that was their chance to kind of get into it. Like, what would you say maybe about schemes like that happening again? Like, do you have hope for that happening? Would you like to see it happen?
I would like to see it happen. I would love to see that sort of opportunity coming back in again. You go back years, there used to be hundreds of little farms in the borders as well, not necessarily council owned, a Crew or Benson Weems or such like. But the fact of the matter is they're now either swallowed up by large farms and never going to return to a smaller farm, or again going back to forestry, they're just getting planted and that's it, they're gone forever basically. So I can't honestly see it around here anyway. I can't honestly see it going down that road.
That starter farm that was out in 2011, we thought, oh, that might come back up again, but no, it's going to be just let for seasonal grazing, and that's it at the moment. They're going to sell the house and on the farm, and that's it. So slowly they are disappearing.
I'll just ask you a few questions that have come up. So this is from Anna. She said, yesterday we heard from the Inkpot farm run by a mother with 2 daughters. Hannah talked about the challenges they have faced being women in farming. So Kirsty, this one's for you. What challenges, if any, do women in farming face from your experience?
I'm going to say not really much here. There's a lot of female farmers in this area, or daughters working on farms up here. So, I mean, no, I've been to the mark, bid on sheep, never looked at, I think it's used to be up here. I mean, there's the farm next door, the farm wife's out always helping. Here, his wife's out helping as well. Got a friend who's running the sheep on her dad's farm. So up here, there's no difference between being male or female here.
And another question from Anna is, what can tenant farmers do, if anything, to shift the terms of tenancies to support more sustainable farming practices?
I'm not very sure, to be honest with you.
I know that on our tenancy, we're not allowed to do this, not allowed to do that, we can't put fertilizer on the field, this, that, and the other. And I mean, to be honest, it could just do with being, fertilized and just given a bit TLC, but our hands are tied. It's written in the tenancy that we can't do this and we can't do that. So it would make the grazing better if we could fertilize it, or even a couple of the fields you could probably take a crop of hay off in the summer, but we're just tied. We're not allowed to do that. We're not allowed to do this.
And then another question is, one thing that is helping the financials on our small holding is selling the hogs in boxes direct to customers. Can you finish your lambs? And if so, have you thought about selling direct?
It's such a long trip to an abattoir here. It would, by the time you send them to abattoir and go and pick them up again, the cost would be, all the small abattoirs are closed up here. Where's the nearest one?
There's a small one at Lockerbie now and again, but it's stored out. To be honest, it's not just the abattoir problem as well, it's the finishing of the lambs. Yes, we can finish a handful for ourselves, but the feed prices is kind of pushing that beyond us, and obviously, as Kirsty touched on just now, planting, finishing crops is not an option for us. We don't have a shed to put them in to put them out the bad weather to finish lambs on. So bulk of ours go store. It's just the cheapest and easiest option to to sell them for us, apart from breeding stock, which we were able to push on for the following year.
Yeah, we're lack of grass as well.
Mm.
It's just that's kind of stopping as well.
Yeah.
And has, you know, things like, I guess, the abattoirs and like Brexit and things like that, have they affected you as smaller farmers, maybe more than bigger ones or less? Or maybe you could talk about that a little bit as well.
To be honest with you, ever since Brexit, the price of lambs went through the roof.
Mhm.
So it always happens when there was a recession or something like that. For some reason, farming always seems to gain on that side of it. Whether it's the fact that more folk are realising that this food's actually on their shores here, and they're actually taking the time to buy it, or what, I'm not 100% sure, but certainly right now, farmers on lamb and beef anyways, maybe not so much on pork side of things, but most farmers are quite enjoying the prices at the moment. But again, the price of feed, the price of fertilizer, the price of fuels went through the roof, so that kind of cancels anything that we've made on that side of it anyway. So that's probably the biggest problem with Brexit/COVID is the fuel prices, and the feed prices has went through the roof as well. So it's you get it in one hand and hand it back out in the other.
And like, I guess like looking for the future for the next, if you could think of like the next 20 years, ideally, say someone said, we're going to give you a small kind of 100-acre maybe farm, and then, you know, you knew you could have that for like 25 years. Ideally, like what difference would that make to your future? Like how would that help you plan? Is that something that would help? Like something like that. Could you talk a little bit about like maybe that would help? And if you, yeah, like you didn't have to kind of worry about the future or maybe funding, like how that would maybe affect how you farm and things like that.
I think if we were given 100-acre farm, it's still not enough to make a living from. So you would still have to work away, but it would cut out the cost of travelling, and even if there was buildings and stuff, it'd make lambing time easier because we lamb outside. It would just, as I say, 100 acres isn't enough.
It's not a lot, but it would be security as well. You can plan whether you're going to plant something, kind of herbal leaves perhaps, which are going to help the soil production as well on the farm. So you're not going to rely on fertilizers quite so much. With us being only 5 years, we can't do anything with the ground, so it's getting poorer and poorer and poorer all the time. If you had that 25 years out in front of you, you can kind of build on the soil, which improves the grass, which improves the stock. It's always a rolling thing that you can work on. And like I say, it just kind of gives you a little bit of security you can work with over a few years.
Yeah, I mean, we've got one field which is just, it's rashes up to your elbows. I mean, we did get someone in to top it the first few years, but by the time you get someone to top it, it's taken them 8 hours, and they're charging for the tractor and the topper and their time. It soon takes a big lump of money. So this year we invested in a topper for the back of the bike. Yes, it doesn't do a good as job as a tractor, but it does do it and saves us a bit of money. But the wet rashy field, ideally we would plough it, reseed it, have the drains fixed. But why spend that money when it's not ours, and we could be out in next year? And so it's, yeah, you could do improvements to make your life a bit easier.
And I guess with that, we're thinking like that, do you think that maybe like if there was more sustainable methods proposed to you, or like working with people who could do that, if you had your own land, would that be a more viable kind of way of working, if you like, because you'd be able to plan for the future rather than kind of it being a landowner who has a lot of land who might work with them who might not?
Yeah, it would be a much more viable option if you're kind of working with someone that's
Excuse
going to work.
me just now.
The dog's went now. it would certainly help if you've got someone that's willing to work with you, a landowner that's willing to work with you, can make that a viable option for the future. When you're working with landowners such as ours, and they've got the reasons for why they're doing what they're doing, but it does kind of narrow the scope out, even for the next tenant that's got to come in after us. It means we're leaving it maybe not worse, but it's certainly not any better when we come out the place. So it may be slightly short-sightedness is maybe not helping out the job out too much there. So.
I have one last question to ask you, but I don't know if Kirsty can hear me or not.
Yeah, Kirsty. 1 second.
And then if anyone else though on the floor like wants to ask anything, just type in the box if you have questions, maybe about schemes, if you're looking to kind of get into something and you need some advice, then just feel free to type or unmute yourself and ask questions. But if not, the last question I'm going to ask is, so say someone came to you and they asked you both for one piece of advice. They've just entered into a tenancy or they've just started renting some land. They may be in a similar situation you were when you were in the first year. What advice would you both give them?
Think again.
Don't do it.
I don't know. It's difficult to say on that one.
I think, like, there's been, not to get sad on it, there's been too many family tragedies in the last few years on my side of the family. Just one recently this year, and I think it's made me think, just go for it. As life's far too short, just grab it with both hands, because you never know how long you're going to be here. I mean, you're never guaranteed you're going to wake up tomorrow, is what our thinking is now after the last year, couple of years. So no, just if you want to do it, just do it, grab it, try your best, and that's all you can do.
So I think that's really good advice anyway. And I just wanted to say like a really big thank you to you two for being part of the film, but also for joining us tonight. So a Friday is Kirsty and Kev's gin night, so I've taken them away from that. But I think it's really nice to kind of hear your perspectives, and it's also, I always think farmers who speak at events like this, it's also really brave, because it's like putting yourself on a platform and like opening yourself out when them, like, you know, it's quite a hard thing to do when that's not what you do in your job, and that there can be like negative kind of stereotypes. Obviously kind of coming to something new is like, I think it's great that you're here and you're speaking as well. So just a big thank you for me and for everyone who came to listen as well.
You're welcome.
Yep. Thank you for including us.
And just to finish off, if people want to find out more about your journey or watch how you get on, and for you, Joanne, if people want to find out more about your work, how would they do that?
Well, if they want to find out more about Kirsty and Kev, Kirsty does have a Facebook page where she shares her story and her journey. So Kirsty, if you can type that in chat, maybe your Facebook page, and she has an Instagram as well. But I'll let Kirsty introduce that, and then if they want to find out,
I'll probably, because I'm on my phone, it's kind of hard to type because the laptop died.
Okay. What's the name of your Facebook account, and then I'll find it and then I'll share it.
K&K, was it? No, Creek Farming, K&K Duncan Creek Farming. If they search for that, it should come up. And also my Instagram is Kirsty Sheep, all one word.
And it's IE for Kirsty, which you can see that written. And if people want to find out more about my work, so I've been doing a project with Kirsty and also with Franza, who is here, if I give her a wave. So you guys might recognize each other actually from pictures. I don't know. But that work was looking at women in farming. So with that work, it's more documentary photography, but it kind of follows women in farming. And then at the moment, I'm doing a Teesdale project, which is looking at farming in Teesdale, which is obviously kind of changing quite a lot in terms of how that's being managed. So if you want to follow that, I'll just pop my website in here. And it is at Joanne Coates on Instagram and on Twitter, but I have the worst name for a Yorkshire person to pronounce, so I'll just literally type it, otherwise you won't know what I'm saying.
Okay, so thank you so much for your time this evening. I just want to echo everything Joanne said. I found the film really brave to do, and I can't believe you shared your story, and I'm sure it will get a lot more people talking as well. So thank you for that and for coming, and I hope to see you at other Northern Real Farming Conference events. So yeah, I guess I will stop recording and